I asked you all to introduce yourselves, so I think it's only fair that I do the same. My name is John Phillips. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm an associate professor and, for all my sins, the chair of the Department of Political Science and Public Management here at Austin Peay. And it's always a pleasure to teach politics in the Middle East. This was one of the very first classes, actually, that I was asked to teach when I arrived at Austin Peay back in fall of 2012, and this is now the 8th time that I've had the privilege of teaching the course. Now, I think it's fair to ask what your professor's qualifications are for teaching a course like this. Why should you believe anything they have to say, especially about issues like the Arab-Israeli conflict or Iran, where public debate is really often quite deeply polarized and political narratives frequently engage with the evidence, shall we say, somewhat selectively. Now, the honest answer is that I'm not a Middle East area specialist in the strict sense of the term. My subfield in political science, that is to say, the subfields I took my exams on for my master's and my PhD, are comparative politics and political theory. Now, political theory actually plays only a relatively small role in this class, outside of a few conceptual discussions about democracy, legitimacy, and political institutions and their classification. Comparative politics, on the other hand, plays a much larger role. A major part of my academic background, actually, is the political economy of development, especially the political economy of resource-rich countries. That was actually the focus of my dissertation research for many years. And it's led me to spend a great deal of time thinking about the economic and political trajectories of countries in the Middle East, trying to modernize and trying to develop both those countries with oil wealth and those without it. Beyond that, a great deal of what I know I had to teach myself over time. But I also owe important intellectual debts to a number of scholars who really shaped how I think about the region. One is Nina Tannenwald, who's a professor at Brown University, for whom I worked as a teaching assistant in international politics many years ago. And her approach to teaching the Arab-Israeli conflict had a really important influence on how I, certainly imperfectly, try to teach that topic myself. I also owe a major debt to Melanie Kamet, now at Harvard University, who taught me comparative politics in grad school, and who also wrote a chapter in your textbook. She was a professor who assigned well over 400 pages of reading per week in her pro seminar in comparative politics. So I have to say that my sympathy for student complaints about reading loads in my own classes might be somewhat limited as a result. And finally, on the political economy of oil and development, I owe a big debt to Pauline Jones, who is now at the University of Michigan, where she's the director of the Digital Islamic Studies curriculum. She served as a reader on my dissertation, and is probably one of the world's leading experts on Central Asian oil wealth and political development. In fact, Pauline Jones and Melanie Kamet co-edited the Oxford Handbook of Politics in Muslim Societies, which came out in 2021. Which I should probably find time to buy a copy of at some point. So, if Dr. Tannenwald, Dr. Kamet, and Dr. Jones are my academic parents, in a sense, on this subject, then by the end of this course, you will all be their academic grandchildren, in some sense, which may or may not be comforting news for you. What you'll notice, though, in this class is a strong emphasis on institutions, economics, and comparative politics, probably a little bit more than you would find in a traditional area studies course. What this means in practice is that we often use specific countries in the Middle East and historical episodes as illustrations for broader political dynamics rather than studying these things in isolation. So, for example, we'll look at how failed modernization efforts in the Ottoman Empire and Egypt during the 19th century really foreshadowed later debates about industrialization and economic development in the 20th century. We'll examine Lebanon as a case study and how constitutions attempt to manage ethnic and religious conflict. We'll also see how a relatively small country like Jordan played a really outsized role in diplomacy and the Cold War. So the goal in the class is not simply to memorize facts about countries. The goal is to use the Middle East to better understand politics more generally. Now, any course with a title as broad as Middle Eastern politics has to make choices. We're going to spend a lot of time discussing history, Arabs and Israelis, Iran, Islam, political economy, oil, institutions, and the historical roles of Britain and the United States in the region. But we're going to spend somewhat less time on topics like terrorism, social movements, Iraq, water politics, agriculture, and the Maghreb. Those choices probably reflect a mixture of current events, my own expertise or lack thereof, the accelerated format of the course, which means it's a little bit unfair to ask you to do all these extra things. Decisions about depth versus breadth in the course, right? How much do I want this to be a survey course versus how much do I really want you to understand particular topics and therefore dive deeper. And then frankly, also the strengths and limitations of your textbook, which is good on some areas and chooses not to talk about or only touch briefly on others. For example, when I first taught this course in 2012, Iraq dominated many conversations about the region. But today, Iran often feels more central to current events. So courses evolve because politics evolves. So let's wrap things up. My hope is that even though we obviously can't learn everything about a region that's this large and this complicated, you will leave the class nonetheless having learned a great deal and perhaps with enough curiosity to help learning more, right, going forward. The Middle East remains one of the most strategically important regions in the world, and certainly one which the United States continues to play a major role, a role that people in the region sometimes have somewhat mixed feelings about, as you might imagine. But one of the goals in the course is to help you think more carefully, historically, and analytically about why that is.